Born on the 10th of May 1957 as Simon John Ritchie, but also known as John Beverley, Sid was the only child of Mother Ann. It was a nomadic, poverty-stricken childhood as they moved in and around the London area. When Sid turned 16, she threw him out on the streets. His mother had no interest in his life. She was into the hardcore drug scene, heroin and opiates. That was her life. Sid Vicious was given his education in unhealthy lifestyles early in his existence. His father, a Grenadier Guard in the British Army named John Ritchie, left the family shortly after his son's birth, and his stepfather Christopher Beverley died after only 6 months, leaving Anne to raise young Sid primarily on her own. Shortly after her first marriage ended abruptly, Anne relocated herself and her son to the Spanish island of Ibiza, returning to England in 1965 just prior to her second marriage, and living in Kent for several years before moving to Hackney in 1971. It was here that John made the acquaintance of John Lydon, while both were attending Hackney Technical College in 1974. It was also during this period that he started experimenting with drugs and began to act out violently. This destructive behavior would earn him much notoriety in later years. John Lydon, aka Johnny Rotten, had another friend, John Gray. The Johns began to haunt the King's Road in Chelsea, London. They were all in their late teens, from North or East London, and this was a new part of the capital to discover. In mid to late 1975, the nicknames came into play. 3 of the 4 Johns were transformed by pseudonyms that, beginning as teenage jokes, became eventually international news. Lydon became Johnny Rotten, thanks to Sex Pistols guitarist Steve Jones. Beverley became Sid Vicious, thanks to Lydon. John Wardle became Jar Wobble, thanks to Sid. Sid was named after Lydon's pet hamster. It was a laugh, because Sid wasn't vicious then. He was playful, funny, very style-conscious, a glam rock aficionado. Vicious was a strong name to be saddled with. The script was set and, like many scripts, it took over the actor to the point where person and persona became fatally blurred. Be careful what you set yourself up for should be a pop culture warning, and Sid was more vulnerable than most. Ultimately, Sid dropped out of school and spent his time hanging around with the so-called Bromley Contingent, a gang of disaffected youths that adopted the music and fashions of the emerging UK punk rock scene and maintained an orbit around John Lydon. Before the end of the year, he had joined Susie and the Banshees as a drummer, although this situation did not endure far beyond the group's debut performance in September of 1976. By early 1977, he had been drafted into the Sex Pistols to replace departing bass player Glenn Matlock, despite the marked limitations of his playing ability. Supposedly the volume of Sid's bass was turned down during many of the Pistols' shows, and his recorded parts were actually performed by either Matlock or guitarist Steve Jones. Prior to Sid joining, the Sex Pistols had already earned themselves widespread notoriety for their combative attitudes and use of profanity during an early interview on national television with Bill Grundy. Their debut single, Anarchy in the UK, released by EMI in November of '76, also created considerable controversy, despite EMI's decision to cease production after less than 2 months. On March 10, 1977, A&M signed the Sex Pistols up outside Buckingham Palace in a mock ceremony, after the band had been dropped by EMI, although the real signing had actually occurred the previous day. However, A&M dropped the band within a week, and Sid helped to maintain this anarchic reputation by vandalizing the office of A&M's managing director, an act he consummated by vomiting on the director's desk. The band was forced to find a new home a week later, and so it was their next single, God Save the Queen, was instead released by Virgin in May of 1977. The song instigated an even stronger negative response than Anarchy in the UK, but the resulting hype also successfully pushed it up to the number 2 position in the British charts, although there is some evidence to suggest that it might have actually reached number 1. Sid became the Sex Pistols' mascot. Encouraged to run wild, constantly drunk, he typified what it meant to be anarchistic British youth, inventing the pogo dance and coming out with pithy, nihilistic statements that defined this razor-bladed new age. In John Ingham's seminal October 1976 Sounds article, Welcome to the Rock Special, Sid dominated the quotes.
I didn't even know the Summer of Love was happening. I was too busy playing with me Action Man. I've only ever been in love with a beer bottle and a mirror.
The Sex Pistols, a runaway train of engineered chaos and anti-establishment provocation steered by the extremely canny McLaren, allowed Sid to indulge his base desires and unchecked emotions for an audience of teens drawn to his sneering persona and ready for refreshing change. The drug-taking wasn't the half of it. His self-destructive, attention-seeking behavior even stretched to self-harming with the serrated lid of a Heinz baked beans tin. Issued in October, the Pistols' debut full-length Never Mind the Bollocks, Here's the Sex Pistols lived up to the controversy created by the two preceding singles. The album's title resulting in an obscenity trial that was ultimately dismissed. A month after the LP release, the fate of the band's already rapidly deteriorating bass player was sealed through his meeting with ex-prostitute heroin addict Nancy Spungen, an unbalanced groupie from New York who had come to London with the intention of latching on to a punk celebrity. Nancy found the equally unbalanced Sid an easy target, and soon had him sharing her heroin habit as well as her bodily fluids. This tumultuous relationship created significant problems between Sid and his bandmates. Lydon in particular repeatedly pressed his friend to sever ties with Spungen, but the unhealthy codependence that had formed between the two was something that Sid was unwilling to end. Born in 1958 and raised in the Philadelphia suburbs, she was difficult from birth, impossible to console, prone to tantrums, hostile, insatiable, demanding, and a bully to her younger sister and brother. "A 7-year-old ran our household," says Deborah, her sister. "When she wanted something, no matter how big or small, she hollered and screamed and backed us into a corner until we were the ones to back down. We gave in to her. Why? Because there was absolutely no peace in the house until she got what she wanted." When she was a bit older, Nancy attacked her mother with a hammer. The family brought her to a succession of doctors, psychologists, and clinics. At age 11, she was diagnosed with schizophrenia, although Deborah says the doctor didn't disclose the diagnosis to the family. At one point, Nancy was committed to a mental hospital, then sent to a boarding school for troubled kids, before arriving in New York City at the age of 17. By that point, she was already taking drugs and sleeping with musicians. From the time of her arrival in New York, Nancy carried drugs to meet musicians. She was blatantly honest about it. She bought drugs for the band members, so they would let her into the inner circle. She was honest about being a prostitute as well. The punk scene, like any other scene, had its little hierarchies. There were groupies that had been around for a long time because of their looks. In order to be a groupie, normally you had to be tall and skinny and have fashionable clothes. There were a bunch of girls like that on the scene. And then along comes Nancy. She's not trying to be cute or charming. She wasn't telling people she was a model or a dancer. She had mousy brown hair and she was a bit overweight. She basically said, "Yeah, I'm a drug-using prostitute and I don't give a damn." By the spring of 1977, Nancy had worn out her welcome, says former Dead Boys guitarist Cheetah Chrome. She took off for London, following heartbreakers Johnny Thunders and Jerry Nolan, but even her reliable targets were tiring of her. London scenester Bebe Buell says Nolan, who died in '92, tried to shake Nancy. I remember Jerry saying to me, "If this chick Nancy Spungen tries to find me, please don't tell her where I'm staying." He was trying to dodge a bullet. Then Nancy found her twisted Romeo, working class, musically challenged, highly impressionable, and enamored of the New York punk scene. I remember talking to Sid on the bus, and he really seemed to care for her, a friend remembers. He didn't have any anger or hatred towards her. Sid very much loved Nancy. They seemed to communicate and connect. At the start of 1978, the Sex Pistols embarked on their first American tour, organized by their manipulative but genius manager, Malcolm McLaren. The tour fell apart after only 2 weeks, however, and a few days after a performance at Winterland in San Francisco, Johnny Rotten announced the dissolution of the band, apparently as a bluff, but no one called him on it, and McLaren and half the band promptly jetted off to Brazil. Sid had not fared very well in his forced separation from Nancy during the tour, and he immediately flew to New York to reunite with her. A short period was spent back in England before travelling to Paris to contribute to McLaren's Julian Temple-directed film The Great Rock and Roll Swindle, a largely fictional account of the Sex Pistols' history. Sid's first solo tracks would be recorded for the film's soundtrack, which included a parody of the Frank Sinatra standard, My Way. By the end of the American tour, it was over for the Pistols. Back in London, Sid attempted a solo career, with Nancy now calling herself his manager. By the end of August 1978, they returned to New York, moving into the Chelsea Hotel. When she came back with Sid, it was like she had triumphed, says Eileen Polk, who was a close friend of Sid and Nancy. She had shown everybody that she really had what it took to become this famous groupie. Some people were outraged by it. They just couldn't believe that she had succeeded in her quest. Victor Colicchio, an actor, screenwriter, and member of a short-lived 70s band called the Dead Squirrels, also lived at the Chelsea. He saw Nancy's good side, despite her spiraling drug problem. She was highly intelligent and very aware, he says. She could spot someone conning her a mile away. She had a good insight into people. She was aware of phonies and fakes and users. She did display that wild, crazed behavior, but it wasn't her total being. I saw both men and women pushing past her, not acknowledging her, talking to Sid. I think a lot of her nastiness and temper tantrums were rooted in that. I was there one night in a club where some girl offered Sid her number. Nancy said, "Push her down the stairs," and he did, without a second thought. He was a knight in rusty armor. By this time, the drugs were taking over. There's a famous clip of Sid and Nancy from the 1980 documentary, DOA. Sid's nodding off, and Nancy snapping at him to wake up. "They're like honeymooners," says Roberta Bailey. "Wake up, you knucklehead. We're on TV. It's so sad, it's funny." Even the hardcore drug users began to avoid them. Sid and Nancy as a couple were going down the toilet, and everybody could see it, says television guitarist Richard Lloyd. To hang out with Nancy and Sid was to make a grievous mistake for your own health. Accounts of what Sid was really like vary depending on who you ask. Stories of his physically abusing Nancy, vomiting on groupies, strangling cats, and brawling with rednecks on the Pistols' disastrous US tour certainly abound. But others who knew him tell a different story. Steve Severin of the Banshees has commented that he had a brilliant sense of humour, goofy, sweet, and very cute.
Despite all the hassles, what was it that you thought the Pistol were trying to do? I mean, was it just like really kick the establishment out the arse? Sid?
Sid, he's not interviewing me. Please try and wake up. Sid, damn you! Fuck! Everybody was for Sid. I mean, Sid was like, I don't know if you saw any of the gigs, but Sid was like really shining out. And John was being like, nothing. Don't drop it on me again.
Sid's behaviour peaked during the group's final tour of the US. Forcibly withdrawing from heroin, he was out of control. Whether clubbing an audience member with a bass guitar in San Antonio or carving "Gimme a Fix" on his chest in Dallas, he turned the Pistols into a living circus. As Sid dissolved further into a hail of drugs, he had a top 10 record in July with his radical cover of My Way. As the single slipped down the charts, Sid and Nancy moved back to New York, their last journey. Ensconced in their filthy suite at the Chelsea Hotel, they danced with death. At 2:30 a.m., Nancy begged actor and addict Rockets Redglare to score them some Dilauders. Female moans were heard coming from the room shortly before 7:30 a.m. Sid called the front desk about 10 a.m. asking for help. Nancy died early in the morning from a stab wound. The details of that day are ensconced in legend. The drug-addled Sid could not remember the incident, but the knife responsible for the wound was still in the room when Nancy's body was discovered. Police found Sid wandering the hotel hallways, crying. He was immediately taken into custody and charged with second-degree homicide, although Virgin Records put up the money required for bail shortly afterwards. Early that afternoon, he would be arrested for her murder, apparently having confessed to the police, although from the start they never seriously considered anyone else.
The room was very bloody. There was blood on the sheets and blood on the mattress. There was tracks of blood leading into the bathroom where the body of the female was found lying under the sink, and she was stabbed in the stomach.
The whole thing lasted no more than 3 minutes, and out they went. Vicious made no attempt to duck the cameras waiting outside the courtroom, but he refused to respond to any of the reporters' questions and shoved persistent microphones out of his path.
Sid's mental state became even more erratic following his arrest, and an attempt at suicide by slashing his wrists was made several days later, resulting in a 2-week internment at the psychiatric ward at Bellevue Hospital. After assaulting Patti Smith's brother Todd with a broken Heineken bottle at the Hurrah Club while out on bail, Sid had been held at the notorious Rikers Island prison, a 55-day stay during which he had taken part in a drug rehabilitation program that he clearly wasn't taking on board. The boy, born John Simon Ritchie in Lewisham, England, was only 21 when he died. He overdosed on some extremely pure heroin on February the 2nd at the home of his new girlfriend, Michelle Robinson, after a Greenwich Village party thrown to celebrate his release. Supposedly his ashes were scattered on Nancy Spungen grave by his mother Anne Beverly, as per his last wishes, but whether this actually occurred remains in dispute. But all these years later, many people don't believe he killed her. Some say that although Sid was arrested for her murder, it was very unlikely that he would have deliberately killed her. It was probably a case of mutual provocation, resulting in a stabbing compounded by negligence. I think when Sid awoke stoned out of his mind and realized she was dead, He might have assumed he did it, says Eileen Polk, explaining the confession. Everyone has a different theory. Drug deal gone awry, robbery, or just a mistake that came from having too many knives around. Bassist Howie Pyro, a founding member of the New York City punk band D-Generation, who was with Sid the night he died, believes Nancy might have been so desperate for attention that she stabbed herself, thinking Sid would come to her rescue, but that he was too stoned. Nancy's wound wouldn't have killed her if it had been attended to promptly, but Sid had gobbled fistfuls of the barbiturate mix, Tuinal. In my opinion, he was a little on the henpeck side, says Colicchio, who was in and out of the room that night. I don't think he would have killed her unless she told him to. Nancy's death remains an intoxicating subject, swirling in mysteries that will probably never be unravelled. Sid Vicious did not have the emotional resources to deal with fame. He was a lost boy who, somewhat like Peter Pan, never grew beyond a deprived childhood, and his sordid demise was both exploited and callously unmourned. When Sid turned 16, his mother had thrown him out on the streets. When Anne Beverly was interviewed in 1988, she remembered her son with pride, but her anger also came through. I remember saying to him, "It's either you or me, and it's not going to be me. I have got to try and preserve myself, and you just fuck off." He said, "I've got nowhere to go," and I said, "I don't care." Sid has become a romantic hero, like a UK punk version of James Dean. Nobody really cares what he was really like, because he took such a good photo, and, according to the preordained script, died tragically at a young age. Sid knew the role off by heart. He played the part perfectly, and ran with it all the way to the other side. Well, my dears, I hope you have enjoyed and survived this vicious presentation. Not my usual subject matter, but something I have been meaning to cover for a long time, this romantic, dark tragedy of Nancy and Sid. I've had a few suggestions to cover this, and also, this was my era. When I was a teenager, I was part of the punk movement. Not hardcore punk. I had an eclectic music taste. I really liked a lot. I liked glam rock. I liked, hippie music that Johnny Rotten detested. I liked a lot of music, but I was really into punk rock because it was so exciting at the time. My American cousins, of course, had their own punk bands, the Ramones, New York Dolls, and please, I would love for you to share your stories about your era. Everyone is welcome in the community to talk about their particular favorite era. I encourage that, and I do love reading the comments. English UK punk was mine. At that time, we had moved back to England in 1975, and it sort of really started breaking out, 76, 77. My two sisters were living in London. My older sister was a glam rock girl. She loved Bowie and all the other bands that were of that genre. And the younger sister, not younger than me, but younger than my older sister, she was a punk rocker. So she inspired me. She was a drummer, punk rock drummer for many bands during that time. She inspired my interest in punk rock. And of course, when the Sex Pistols came out, I was like, wow, they were like something, it was almost like a breath of fresh air. There was just this violent energy they were giving off. And so many of my neighborhood friends and kids at school were into it. It was just an amazing, it was like a wave. We really needed that. And unfortunately, I don't know what it's like in your country, but here in Switzerland, the mainstream radio stations are atrocious. We have gone back. We have regressed. It is like this bubblegum music, this manufactured pap. It's absolute crap. I'm sorry. I'm sure there's some great bands out there, some great energetic bands, but the stuff they play on the mainstream radio is absolute bollocks. It is, really. I call it bubblegum music. It's this plastic, computerized voices, this synthesized voice that is just awful. As soon as I hear it, I have to turn it off. It just grinds on me. I can hate it. I really do. And so that's why the album, never mind the bollocks, here's the Sex Pistols. I inherited it from my middle sister. When she went to Australia, it was left behind, and my older sister gave it to me, and I played it repeatedly. It was on repeat. My poor mother, she had me when she was 42, a real unexpected delivery. And of course, I was playing this non-stop loud volume. I'm so sorry, Mum. If you're looking down on me from heaven, I know that I'm very sorry about that, but I was just like so much into that album. I eventually ended up returning that album to my sister only about 10 years ago. She didn't even realize I had it. And when I told her I had it, she asked if I could return it, and I did. I wanted her to be reunited with it. But I still have a couple of singles here. You can see them on the screen. That's all that's left. I had many more, and friends asked to borrow them. You know what it's like with books and records. They always promise they're going to give it back in a couple of weeks. And you never see it again, and that's what's happened. Had badges too. Lots of badges. I don't know where they are now. A lot of them are lost. And t-shirts. Oh my God, I wish I'd kept them. I'm going to show you one t-shirt that I still have from that era, but I had lots of punk rock t-shirts, and you just don't think back then of keeping them. Who does? So the ones that are being sold on eBay for high prices are the ones that people forgot about. They're just sitting there probably in the attic or in a long forgotten suitcase. Yeah, and now these things are becoming expensive to buy. They really are collector's items. But getting back to Sid and Nancy, of course, even then I could see Sid and Nancy were like a train wreck, waiting to happen. It was a bit surreal to me. I was only a kid, really. It was a bit surreal, especially after their death. I remember going to the Handyside Arcade in Newcastle upon Tyne. I'll show you a picture of it. It's gone now. Horrible city planners and developers demolished it. Such a building would be a highlight for a city now. That would bring tourists in. But continuously we have idiots in charge of making important decisions, and they demolished it out of greed. Yeah, I'm not going to get into that. This is what it looked like. It was a Victorian arcade, 2 stories. When I used to go there in the late 70s and early 80s, it was at the end of its life. There was a lot of quirky shops in there, and there was a great shop called the Card Bar. Any old Geordies will remember that. The owner died a few years back, but he had all the punk stuff, all the T-shirts, the records, the badges, all the latest stuff you could get, and I loved going there. That was when I took a trip out from basically the country to go into town. I would always go to the Card Bar, and yeah, the arcade in general. It's just a fantastic vibe. That is actually a place where the hippies and punks and mods would meet in peace. There was rarely any sort of fighting breaking out. That was like a neutral ground, and the owner of the shop didn't tolerate any of that. So if you wanted to get in there, they had sort of pinball machines, Space Invaders, stuff like that. It was just a great meeting point. Of course, it's so easy for me to digress with this subject because, I loved it. But I'm going to try and get back to Sid and Nancy. Yeah, it was something was going to happen, wasn't it? I didn't expect the violent death of Nancy the way that happened. I did expect them to die of an overdose. I mean, you're playing with fire with heroin. I've lost so many friends to it. Seeing what happened to Sid and Nancy put me off touching it. It really did. And actually, they used his death on a drugs campaign. I think I'll pop the poster up. You'll see it here now. I personally don't believe he murdered her. At least not intentionally. I think he might have had a blackout. These are the 2 possibilities I have in mind. He had a blackout, had no idea what was going on, and possibly did stab her. I've seen a few documentaries about Russian prisons, and of course in Russia they drink a lot of vodka, and when these people have had blackouts, they end up murdering people and have had no idea they did it afterwards. It's a terrible thing. I had blackouts back in Australia in the 90s, drinking spirits and taking cocaine. Luckily I didn't murder anybody, but ended up verbally abusing people and getting into physical fights, and next day had no idea, no recollection of it. So it's possibly he did something like that, or that she ended up stabbing herself as a suicide act. I don't know, and he has no recollection of it either. But I don't think that he would murder her. He was totally besotted with her. I don't think that was ever going to happen. And the tragic thing that his mother bought the heroin for him, what she said was that she bought it because she didn't want him going out and scoring himself, being out basically on bail, having the police breathing down his neck. She wanted to get it for him so he wouldn't get in trouble. It's just very tragic. But then again, she neglected Sid as a child, and karma's a bitch. I hear that she did sprinkle his ashes on her grave. He actually wanted to be buried with her originally. That didn't happen. He was cremated, and her parents didn't want the last wishes respected because it was a Jewish grave. They're from a Jewish family. He was non-Jewish. They didn't want that, but apparently his mother snuck into the cemetery at night and sprinkled them. But yeah, no one's really sure whether it actually happened. As I mentioned previously, a lot of the stuff that I had is lost to time now. It's just gone missing, or I've given it away. I do have some more badges somewhere. I don't know where they are. I guess one day when I move, I'll find them again. God knows, I've got so much stuff. It's terrifying. I might have showed this in a junk store video already, but not as many people watch the junk store one, so I will show it again. This is original Sex Pistols badge that I got from the Card Bar back then. Amazing. I still have it. I actually I framed it, as you can see, in a frame to give it, sort of accentuate the colours of it. I do it. That's quite a large badge. I have smaller ones in a box somewhere. As I say, this T-shirt, I have mentioned this. I have showed this on one of the junk store videos. My sister bought this for me. Not sure where anymore. We did visit Malcolm McLaren and Vivienne Westwood's sex shop on King's Road in Chelsea. We did go there. I do remember going in there. I was a child. I was young. It wasn't what I was expecting it to be, considering the name. It's mostly just clothes, punk clothes and stuff. But I do have a memory. I'm not sure whether she got it from there or whether she got it from Petticoat Lane Markets or from Bayswater Road Markets. The artist there would sell stuff. She's not sure anymore either. This would have been during their courtship, probably about 1980, I guess. And I still have it after all these years. All the T-shirts I don't have anymore. Somehow I kept this one. Must be worth some money now, because I've seen some of the T-shirts, the punk rock T-shirts, are selling for a fortune. This one I've had framed as well to preserve it. Yeah. And the next picture you're going to see is me, I think about 13 or 14. No, it's not. This is the few remaining singles I have in very bad condition. They were played continuously in relic condition. This one doesn't even have the sleeve. I had that up until about 20 years ago. I'm not sure what happened to the sleeve. I still have the sleeve for this, but also in relic condition. The single is still in there. Also had been played continuously. I had Pretty Vacant. I had My Way. By the way, if you're on Patreon, you would have heard My Way at the end of the presentation, or most of it. If you are watching this on YouTube, you may not have seen My Way. You can go and check it out, of course, on YouTube. If I get a copyright claim, I'm gonna try and counterclaim with fair use, but they may not accept it. We'll see what happens. Yeah, look, I just wanted to include that. It still has the original Virgin bag from Eldon Square, late 70s, early 80s, in Newcastle upon Tyne. I'll put a picture up on the screen how that looked. Look at that, I still got it after all these years. That was my favourite place too. Loved going there. It was so exciting. You got pocket money. You want to get the latest single. There's me, about 13 or 14. Yeah, starting out as a punk. Had no money. Even the leather jacket wasn't leather. It was PVC. I was into Toya Wilcox at that time. I ended up with studs all over that jacket. God, look at it. A crappy chain hanging off. I didn't have many photos back then. It's a shame. I had some weird and wonderful hairstyles and even weirder outfits. I just didn't, there was no photos taken, which is a shame. And this one here, I'm about 18 there. Hanging on to sort of the punk hairstyles, but I'd moved to Australia by this stage. So I was just getting on with being a taxpayer. You all know what it's like. Yeah, so here we have Malcolm McLaren and Vivienne, or the late Malcolm McLaren and the late Vivienne Westwood's sex shop in Kings Road, Chelsea, circa middle to late 70s. Quite an exciting time, and my sisters were living in Chelsea at that time. It was great for me, because I lived up north with my parents. They were living down in Chelsea there in London by themselves, and I used to come and visit them. Just have amazing memories of that time, and going to the Kings Road with them was incredible, and seeing all the colourful punks. There we see his shop there, and some really cool people in the shop. Amazing. Yeah, the shop, they went through a few different incarnations. There's the one there where afterwards he had with the clock that went backwards. The name escapes me now. World's End. Called it World's End. So here we see Vivienne Westwood's World End in London. That came last because the Sex Boutique came first. Well, actually, Vivienne Westwood and Malcolm McLaren had been cashing in on all the music styles prior to that. The hippie movement. Before that, Teddy Boy. Malcolm McLaren was selling Teddy Boy clothes from a garage. So that they just kept, every time there was a new movement, they would move with it to cash in on it. So there we have the World's End. That, it rings a bell. I'm sure we must have went there. And this was, after the Sex Boutique closed, they opened up Seditionaries, which, a lot of the famous punks also visited, even worked there. At the end, I mentioned Debbie Juvenile. She worked there. So I just love this shop front for its simplicity. I mean, they should recreate it and put it in the Victoria and Albert Museum. Isn't that fantastic? It just sort of stands out. It doesn't need any extra decoration. It obviously inspired Louis Vuitton, because here we see they have recreated the shop front. The designer Ben Kelly, instead of the air vents, he's made these rings, and they've replaced the diagonal bar with the Vuitton V there. The punk movement inspired a lot of people over the decades. Now, this was another shop that my sister just mentioned to me this morning, called Boy. This was 153 Kings Road, whereas the Sex Boutique was 430 Kings Road. And my sister said this was also a great shop to buy punk clothes and such. This was nothing to do with Malcolm McLaren or Vivienne Westwood. Here we see this was founded by Stefan Rayner in 1976. Some interesting history. Now, you know, all of this stuff now is ending up in museums. A lot of it's in the Victoria and Albert Museum. The artwork of Nevermind the Bollocks, Here's the Sex Pistols, is in the Victoria and Albert Museum, while a lot of the other original posters and designs are selling for very high prices. Never would have thought it back then, of course. So collect your music memorabilia today. Start doing it. It's going to be worth some money. Well, if the bands are big enough, I guess it will be worth some money. Wow. It's amazing to think. Back then, you know, I had a lot of posters and stuff. Just chucked them all out. You never thought, did you? Let me know if you've got any interesting stuff out there, any music memorabilia, original stuff. I'd love to know what you've got, and if it's really interesting, I'd love you to share it with me on one of my social media accounts. I can even give you my email address. I'd love to see what you've got. But yeah, very interesting. Yeah, is that Debbie Wilson, aka Debbie Juvenile? We'll talk about her in a minute. But yeah, go and check it out if you don't know anything about it. If you're from America and you don't know anything about this era of punk history in the UK, it's really quite interesting. I've been listening to the music, the tracks again from the Nevermind the Bollocks LP, and wow, mentally I felt young again, at least mentally. It was amazing going down memory lane, hearing that again. Another part which is also interesting me is the New York's Chelsea Hotel, now closed. What a shame. A bohemian enclave. What a loss. What a loss. If you think that the bohemians, the artists, build up, the rich people will come and buy out. It's very sad. You know, there's nowhere left for people who are on a budget, a very strict budget, to be creative. And that manager, what was his name? I've been watching a few documentaries about the Chelsea Hotel. I may even do a presentation about it. It has really been of interest to me. Very sad that it has now, you know, closed its doors and probably be reopened at exorbitant prices. It's a bit of, that's of course where, you know, Nancy and Sid had their fatal night. Room 100 was the room they were in, and apparently the manager, what's his name again? The manager, does it say here? He didn't want that becoming a morbid shrine, so he had it cut up into smaller rooms. So, you know, there wasn't any room 100 after that. There we go, that's how it's an interesting history too. I do think I will cover this. Quite amazing. Yeah. And there we go. There they are. I will put the link to this article up for you. But yeah, that's also of great interest to me, the Chelsea Hotel. And what a shame, again, what a shame that it is no longer. Now, this girl here was close friends with Susie Sue from Susie and the Banshees. Her name was Debbie Wilson, but her pseudonym was Debbie Juvenile. And she was basically the single No Feelings by the Sex Pistols. It was about her. And there's a bit of a mystery surrounding her. She was really a punk queen mascot. She was everywhere, you know, always photographed, very photogenic. But there is a mystery. Some people say that she died in 2012, and others are not sure. There doesn't seem to be any evidence that she died. They're saying that she died of cancer. If anyone out there can confirm whether actually she is no longer with us, I would love to know if anyone is in the know about her, because otherwise she has just disappeared off the face of the map. Some people are saying that she's doing this and doing that, and some nasty rumours, but I suppose that she is dead, or maybe she just wants her anonymity, but I'd love to know for sure. Anyway, my dear friends, I have rattled on long enough. This video must be coming up to near an hour. I'm going to go now, unless I can think of something else and come back later, but I think that's about it. Love to hear your comments. Would love to hear about your music era, what you grew up with, and what your favorite music was, your favorite bands. Love you and leave you, and see you next time. Bye bye. I did want to comment on this particular photo. I like this, not only because I really like Johnny Rotten. I'm not sure where this was taken, but it just reminds me of those transport cafes on the motorway. We used to travel down from Newcastle to London, and you'd stop in at these transport cafes. This could be a bar. It looks like he's drinking beer. It might be one of those bars, but it just reminds me of, the transport cafes with the watery tea, stewed tea and stuff like that. But yeah, Johnny Rotten, love the guy, still love him today. Such an unapologetic, straight to the point guy. He still is. Tells it how it is, and he's nearly always right. A lot of people don't like his personality because of the way he is, but I think he's a great man, a visionary, and I'd love to meet him. If you listen to this, Johnny, please come and visit me in Australia, in Switzerland. I don't know where I am anymore. I've gone a bit nuts. Come and visit me in Switzerland and have a coffee or a beer, whatever is your poison. Great man. His wife died sometime this year, not that long ago. He cared for her for many years. She had Alzheimer's. Just a top guy. He said a lot of stuff that has proven to be true over the years, and I've got great respect for John Lydon. Loved it when he was in Public Image Limited too. Some great songs. Great respect to you, John. May you live a long time. I'm definitely going now. Bye bye.